Everyone knows the truth. He is not one of us.
Careful, brother. You will wish you never said those words.
Enough! This bickering will not stand in my court.
Nobody in this room knows it yet. But the real imposter isn't the one they think it is.
Did you hear what he said? In front of the whole court, in front of the chiefs.
I heard.
And that's it? Mama, he called me an outsider. In my own father's throne room.
Sit down, Obinna.
I don't want to sit down.
Sit down. You think this is about the princess?
Isn't it? She hasn't even landed and already Kunle is.
This was never about the princess. That girl is only the spark. The fire has been waiting a long time. What does that mean? It means your brother has feared you since you were both boys.
Feared me? Mama, he has everything. What does he have to fear?
Ask your father that question, not me.
Why do you always do this? Every time I ask you something real, you send me to him.
Because some things are not mine to say.
Forgive me, my prince. The Oba is asking for you and for Prince Kunle. Now, tonight.
This isn't finished.
No, it isn't.
The rain
Move
had
with me,
not
chiefs.
stopped for hours.
Move away from
At the
here!
palace back gate, a young woman stood soaked to the skin, her wrapper clinging to her, mud climbing up to her ankles, no guards, no coral beads, nothing to mark her as anything but a stranger. Prince Kunle strode past with two visiting chiefs, barely sparing her a glance. "Get her away from the gate," he said, not even slowing down. "We don't feed beggars here." "I only asked for shelter until morning, my prince," she said. "Nothing more." He didn't stop, then
with me,
asked
chiefs.
somewhere else. "This is
Move
a
away
palace,
from here."
not a resting house for wanderers." A guard shoved her back. She stumbled into the mud and said nothing. She simply watched him disappear through the gate. "Remember this moment, Prince Kunle," she whispered to herself. "Remember exactly how you
Move with me,
treated me
chiefs.
tonight." 3
Move
days
away
later,
from here.
drums would sound at that same gate. The whole kingdom would kneel before a woman wearing her name. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you emotional stories that stay with you. If you're new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a story. Nobody in the palace knew her real name that night. To the head cook, Iyabo, who found her shivering near the grain store, she was simply a stranger, caught in bad weather. Who let you in here?" Iyabo had asked. "I asked only for shelter, Mama. I meant no harm." Something about the calm in her voice, the straightness of her back despite the mud, unsettled Iyabo, though she couldn't say why. But there was work to be done, so she handed the stranger a rag and pointed to a mountain of unwashed pots. "If you want to stay under this roof, you work like everyone else, no exceptions." The young woman nodded and took the rag without complaint. 2 days later, laughing with a group of visiting chiefs, Prince Kunle walked through the courtyard and noticed her kneeling among the servants, her hands raw from scrubbing. "You see this one?" he said to the chiefs, amused. "Found
Look at the
wandering
former
our
edge of
gates
the
like a
palace.
stray. Even
Now
the
she is
servants
just a
didn't
common
want to touch
servant.
her hands."
Scrub it
The
until it
chiefs
shines
laughed.
like my crown.
She didn't lift her head. Her hands stilled on the pot for 1 second too long. "Laugh now, my prince," she murmured, so quiet no one heard. "It will not be funny for long."
Look at the
That
former
same
edge of the
evening,
palace.
inside the
Now
palace,
she is just a
the
common
real
servant.
conflict was only
Scrub
beginning.
it until it shines
Obinna
like my
found his
crown.
mother, Ngozi, grinding pepper in her private quarters, unbothered on the surface by what Kunle had said about him earlier that day in front of the whole court. "Did you hear what he said?"
Ask your
Obinna
father that
asked,
question.
in front of everyone. "I
He
heard,"
has nothing to do with
Ngozi
this.
said simply. "And that's it?" "Mama, he called me an outsider in my own father's palace." She set the pestle down and studied his face. "Sit down, Obinna." He sat, jaw tight.
Sit down, Obinna.
"You think this is about the princess,"
I
she
don't
said.
want to sit down.
"Isn't it?"
Sit down.
"This was never about the princess." That girl is only the spark. The fire has been waiting a long time. When he pressed her further, she only said, "Ask your father that question, not me," and refused to say more. A
Let me help you
servant
with these.
interrupted them,
You do not have
breathless.
to do this.
The Oba was calling
want
for
to,
both
Osayamen.
princes, now.
Thank you, Obinna.
In the throne room, Oba Adewale looked older than his years. In 3 days, Princess Osayamen of Benin arrives at this palace, he told his sons. That marriage was arranged before either of you understood what it meant. It was never meant to be a contest between you two. Then why does everyone already treat it like one? Kunle asked. Balogun Fashola stepped forward. Because whoever she chooses to stand beside carries Benin's backing into the succession. Every chief in this hall already knows it. The Oba's face flickered with something closer to fear than anger when Obinna asked whether it was true. There are things about this family, about how this throne will truly be decided, that I have not told either of you, he said, before walking out and leaving both sons in the dark. What none of them knew, what not even the Oba himself knew, was that the real Princess Osayamen had already crossed into the kingdom 4 nights earlier, alone. She had wanted to see this family for herself before stepping into a marriage she never chose. Instead, she had been turned away in the mud by the very prince the throne might depend on.
Move with me, chiefs.
Mocked in front of his chiefs.
Move away from
and
here.
put to work scrubbing pots beside servants who never once suspected the truth. Now, as the palace prepared for a grand royal arrival in 3 days' time, drums, coral beads, a procession fit for 2 kingdoms sealing peace, the real princess was still there, unnoticed, still wearing a servant's wrapper, still carrying mud on her feet, and a secret no one had thought to ask her about. Because in 3 days, another woman would arrive at that same gate, dressed as Princess Osayamen of Benin, and the entire court would kneel before her without a single question. The true royal imposter had not arrived at all. She had been standing among them the whole time. If you're feeling this story, hype it so others can find it. Comment where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. 2 days passed since Prince Kunle had mocked the stranger scrubbing pots in the courtyard, and though he thought nothing more of it, Obinna could not stop thinking about her. He had seen her only once, in passing, on his way to the stables, a young woman with tired eyes and a straight back that didn't match the rags she wore. There was something about the way she carried herself, something that didn't fit the picture of a wandering beggar. He almost stopped to ask her name, almost. But a servant had called him away, and the moment passed. That evening, restless, he found himself in the kitchen courtyard again, drawn by something he couldn't explain. She was there, alone this time, scrubbing the last of the pots by lamplight, her hands raw and cracked from days of unfamiliar labor. "You're the one my brother turned away at the gate," Obinna said. She looked up, startled, then quickly lowered her eyes the way servants were taught to. "Yes, my prince. You don't sound like someone who grew up scrubbing pots." She said nothing for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Hunger teaches everyone the same lessons, my prince, rich or poor." He studied her, unconvinced but not unkind. "What's your name?" She hesitated only a breath too long. "Osaru," she said. Not a lie, exactly. A name close enough to her own to answer to without giving herself away. "Osaru," he repeated. "Well, Osaru, you shouldn't be out here alone this late. It isn't safe." "Kindness from a prince," she said quietly. "I wasn't expecting that today." Something in her tone struck him, not bitterness exactly, but a wound carefully hidden. He didn't press further. He simply picked up a second rag from the basin and, to her visible shock, knelt down and began helping her finish the pots. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm doing it anyway." They worked in silence for a while, and for the first time since arriving at that gate in the rain, Osayamen allowed herself something close to a real smile. Small, careful, but real. The next morning, the palace exploded into motion. Drums echoed from the outer walls. Servants swept every corridor twice over. Chiefs dressed in their finest agbada and George wrappers, preparing to receive the official arrival of Princess Osayamen of Benin. Nozi found Obinna near the stables, adjusting his own ceremonial dress. "You seem distracted," she said. "There's a girl in the kitchens," he said slowly. "Kunle humiliated her at the gate days ago. Something about her doesn't sit right with me." Ngozi's expression sharpened with sudden interest. "Doesn't sit right how?" "I don't know. The way she speaks, the way she carries herself. She said her name was Osaru, but," he shook his head, "it's probably nothing." His mother said nothing more, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer than usual, as though a thought had crossed her mind that she wasn't ready to say out loud. By midday, the procession arrived at the front gate, the grand one this time, with drummers, coral beads, and a woman dressed in full Benin royal regalia, stepping down from a decorated carriage. The entire court gathered to receive her. Balogun Fashola announcing her name with a booming voice that echoed across the courtyard.
Osayamen!
"All hail, Princess Osayamen of
Let all
Benin."
the land bow
The
before
court
her.
bowed low. Oba Adewale
You think this is
rose
about
from
the
his
princess?
seat to
Isn't
greet
it?
her,
She hasn't
his
even
face
landed and already
carefully
Kunle is-
composed,
This was
though
never about
something
the princess.
flickered behind
That girl
his
is only the
eyes.
spark.
The same
fire has been waiting a
hesitation
long
he had
time.
shown days earlier at the mention of her name. Kunle stepped forward first, eager, already imagining himself standing beside her. Obinna hung back, his eyes drifting instinctively toward the kitchen courtyard, toward a girl named Osaru who was, at that very moment, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd in her servant's wrapper, unnoticed, unannounced, watching a stranger accept bows meant for her. No one saw her hands curl into tight fists at her sides. No one heard her whisper, so soft it barely left her lips, "She isn't me." That night, Chief Ogiemwonyi, the very man who had orchestrated the switch back in Benin, pulled the false princess aside in the guest quarters,
No one must
his
ever
voice
know you
sharp
are
with
not
warning.
the true princess.
"You did well
If
today,"
Obinna
he
finds
said,
out, we
"but
are
there is a
both dead."
servant girl in this palace who unsettles me. Something about how the prince spoke of her this morning." "A servant girl," the imposter repeated, unbothered. "Chief, there are 100 servant girls in this palace. Why does one concern you?" "Because I did not expect the real princess to have made it this far ahead of us," he snapped. "She was meant to be delayed at the border. If she is here, in this palace, and no one has recognized her yet, then we are standing on far thinner ice than either of us realized." For the first time since arriving, the false princess's composure cracked. "You told me she wouldn't come. You told me it was safe." "It was supposed to be," Ogiemwonyi said grimly. "Now we have very little time before someone looks at that girl scrubbing pots and asks the one question that ends us both." Outside their door, unnoticed in the shadows of the corridor, Obinna stood frozen, having come to deliver a message for his father. He had heard every word. Obinna didn't move
My
for a
king, there
long
is something
moment
I must
after
tell
the
you.
door closed.
I have carried
His heart
this
was
burden for
pounding,
too long.
the words
Speak freely,
replaying
my
in
queen,
his head.
for my heart listens.
The real princess, scrubbing pots. We are standing on thinner ice than either of us realized. Osaru, the girl with the straight back and the careful words, the girl he had knelt beside, scrubbing pots in the lamplight, without ever once suspecting. He walked away from that corridor faster than he had walked anywhere in his life, straight through the palace, past the sleeping guards, until he reached the small servants' quarters where he knew the kitchen workers slept. He found her sitting alone by a low fire, still awake, staring into the flames, as though she had been waiting for something, or someone, all night. "Osaru," he said, and then stopped himself. That isn't your real name, is it? She looked up at him, and this time she didn't lower her eyes. Something in her had already decided the hiding was over. No, she said quietly, it isn't. I heard Chief Ogiemwoni tonight, talking to the woman in the guest quarters. He called her the false princess. He said the real one had made it into the palace ahead of them, and that no one had recognized her yet. Obina's voice shook slightly. Please tell me I'm wrong. Osayamen rose slowly to her feet, and for the first time, she let herself stand the way she had been raised to stand. Chin lifted, shoulders back, every inch the
Speak
daughter
freely,
of a
my
king.
queen, for my heart listens.
You are not wrong, she said.
So it
My
is
name
revealed.
is Osayamen. I am the true princess of Benin, sent here to marry into this family
forgive me.
under an agreement made before either of us was born.
Osayamen,
I arrived early,
what is the
alone,
meaning of this?
because I wanted to
How
see this
dare you
family
enter
for
my
myself
court in such a
before I
state?
gave my life to it. Your brother had me thrown into the mud at the gate. Your kitchens put me to work, and a woman wearing my name has spent the day accepting bows that were never hers to accept. Obina sat down slowly across from her, stunned into silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Why didn't you tell me? Tonight. Any night. I knelt next to you scrubbing pots. Because I didn't know who I could trust, she said. Chief Ogiemwoni orchestrated this deception to protect both our families from a scandal that could have started a war. My cousin, the woman meant to make this journey, died of fever weeks before we sailed. Rather than risk everything collapsing, he sent someone else in her place, and told me to remain hidden until I understood who in this palace could be trusted with the truth. She paused. You were kind to me before you knew what I was. That told me more than any title could. By morning, the truth could no longer be contained. Obina went straight to his father, dragging Kunle from his chambers along the way, both of them arriving breathless at the Oba's private hall. Osayamen walked in behind them, still dressed in her servant's wrapper, mud-stained sandals and all, chin held high despite everything. Oba Adewale rose from his seat the moment he saw her, and something in his face changed. Recognition, disbelief, and a slow, dawning horror. You, he said, the girl from the kitchens. Yes,
How long will this
Kabiesi,
take, Ngozi?
she said
Till
steadily.
the work is done.
I am
We cannot
also
live like this
Princess
anymore.
Osayamen
I am
of
doing
Benin.
this for us.
This
The
is not
woman
what we
your
planned.
court
Plans
welcomed
change when
yesterday
hunger
with
enters.
drums and coral beads is not. The room fell into stunned silence. Kunle's face drained of color as the memory of the rain, the mud, the laughing chiefs came rushing back to him all at once. I turned you away, he said, barely above a whisper. I called you a beggar. I had you thrown into the mud. You did, Osayamen said simply. There was no cruelty in her voice, only fact. Kunle sank into the nearest chair, his hands over his face, the weight of his own cruelty finally landing on him in full. The Oba, recovering himself, turned sharply to the nearest guard. Bring Chief Ogiemwoni and the woman in the guest quarters, now. And say nothing of why. Within the hour, the throne room filled once more. Chiefs, wives, both princes,
Forgive me, my
and at
king,
the center
for I
of it
have
all,
terribly deceived
two
you.
women standing
She is
side
not
by
the true
side for the
princess,
first
it was all
time.
my doing.
One in
I
coral
alone
beads
bear the
and
burden
fine
of this
cloth,
great shame.
one in a mud-stained wrapper that had somehow become the more powerful garment in the room. Chief Ogiemwoni's face turned ashen the moment he saw them together. Kabiesi, he began.
Do not
I can
underestimate the
explain.
weight of this crown.
You will.
The
the
peace
Oba
we
said,
enjoy was
his
bought
voice
with
cold.
blood.
Every
I will not
detail,
let you tear this
starting
kingdom
with why
apart.
you thought it wise to deceive two kingdoms at once. Ogiemwoni's shoulders sagged. The lie had run its course. Haltingly, he told the truth. The real Osayamen's cousin had died weeks before the journey, and rather than risk the collapse of an alliance meant to prevent old tensions between the kingdoms from reigniting, he had sent a lady-in-waiting in her place, coached in every detail of royal Benin custom, praying no one would ever need to know the difference. The imposter, no longer able to maintain her composure, fell to her knees before the throne. I never wanted this, Kabiesi. I was told refusing meant my family would suffer for the chief's failure. I
Make
am
you tend to
sorry.
that horse
I am
quickly.
so sorry.
I will do that
Oba
immediately,
Adewale
slowly.
studied her for a long moment, his anger tempered, unexpectedly, by something like understanding. He knew better than anyone in that room what it meant to protect people you loved with a lie you never wanted to tell. You will return to Benin, he said finally, with the full truth, and my personal word that no punishment will fall on your family for another man's scheme. Chief Ogiemwonyi's fate is a matter for his own king to decide. He turned to Ogiemwonyi. But you no longer represent this alliance. Not one more day. Later that afternoon, Kunle found Osayamen alone in the palace garden, finally dressed as herself. Simple, without coral beads or ceremony, just a woman who no longer needed to hide. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. What I did to you at that gate, there's no excuse for it. No, she agreed, there isn't. He nodded, accepting it, turning to leave. But, she added, stopping him, you didn't know who I was. You judged a stranger by her mud and her rags, and that says something true about you that I won't pretend not to notice. If you want to be a better man than that going forward, prove it, not to me, to the next stranger who comes to your gate with nothing. Kunle looked at her for a long moment, something humbled settling into his expression. I will, he said quietly. I promise you that. That evening, the whole court gathered once more, torches lit, drums silent out of respect for the gravity of the moment. Oba Adewale stood before his people and told them plainly what had happened. The deception, the humiliation, the truth finally standing in the light. This kingdom nearly bowed to a lie, he said, while the real daughter of an allied king scrubbed our pots and slept by our fires, unseen. Let that be a lesson to every person in this hall. Titles can be worn by impostors. Character cannot be faked for long. He turned to Osayamen. Princess, this family owes you an apology this kingdom cannot fully repay, but we can begin by treating you, from this day, exactly as you deserved from the moment you crossed our border. Osayamen inclined her head, gracious despite everything she had endured. Then let us
Today,
begin
we
again,
stand united
Kabiesi.
as one kingdom.
Properly, this time.
Let this be the
As for
dawn
Obinna,
of our new
he
beginning.
found himself standing beside her as the court applauded. The same quiet kindness that had first drawn them together in a lamplit kitchen, now settling into something neither of them rushed to name. But both of them, for the first time in days, allowed themselves to smile. What would you rate this story? Drop 0 to 10 in the comments right now. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more emotional journeys every day.
Speak freely.